buenas tardes.
Baila, baila.
Muy buenas tardes, ¿cómo estamos? ¿Cómo está la energía? Un poquito cansado, ¿no? Un cafecito para levantar el ánimo. Bueno, me llamo Roberto Martinez, trabajo para Google. Vamos a presentar ahora una charlita sobre qué hace Google para crecer el entendimiento de AI y Machine Learning. La voy a presentar en inglés porque mi español is not very good looking. Aquí está mi contacto. Por cualquier duda que tengan cuando viene a Google, una preguntita puede ser de Machine Learning, puede ser de Google Sheets, no importa. Mi trabajo es ser el champion, el liaison para la comunidad latina en todos Estados Unidos. Y si tienen cualquier dudita, ahí me mandan el correo electrónico. Y con eso vamos a empezar esta charla y si me permiten hablar en inglés, empezamos. Our journey today. So today I'm going to tell you a story about Google. I'm going to tell you what they've done to create the company that's in front of you today and what you can do as a company by leveraging big data sets to create your own amazing moonshot culture. And what I'm going to start the conversation with is inspirational stories because, as I said, in God we trust, everyone else bring their data, but the data's not enough. We have to humanize that data. We have to create a story around that data to drive empathy for our customers. So we're going to start with Google X. How many of us have heard of Google X? Moonshots, right? Most of us have. Then we're going to talk about DeepMind, and DeepMind is, in essence, AI. If the robots are coming for us, that's where it's going to be found, right? It's how do you leverage these big data sets and use these big data sets to create feedback loops to drive the type of results and the type of change you want to see in the world? Then we're going to talk about smart cities and Google and how we implement these type of learnings to drive innovation within our own city. And then we're going to end the conversation with a workshop, very high level, of how to use ideation and rapid prototyping to drive results within your own industry, within your own company, and within your world. It could be Puerto Rico, it could be all of the United States. It doesn't matter. So what is a moonshot? 2010, Sergey says, you know what? I'm so happy that we launched this company. It's fantastic, but I want to change the world. And it's not enough that my company is changing the world by creating information at your fingertips. How do we drastically change the world by a tune of 10x? And what they realized through the data is that the effort that you put in to create 10% increase in growth, it could be revenue, it could be operational excellence, is the same as 10x or 1,000% growth. And so they created this company and they said, all right, we have our main teams, we call them teams, not sectors. Let's create another sector where we bring these eclectic, visionary entrepreneurs, engineers, data scientists, and put them in a corner and have them think 10x. What is the world going to look like 5 to 10 years from now? And what kind of technologies can we create to drive and be at the forefront of that change that we want to see in the world in a positive way? Extremely important. It has to be positive. We have to improve the world we live in. And so they created Project X. And so any Googler that wants to be part of this team, it's a big application, a lot of interviews, and then you get brought in and start creating this type of programming. Now, have you know, the leader within Project X happens to be a Latina. So I'm very proud of that. I love the fact that Latinos are here representing and being part of an amazing program. So what's one actual project that we launched that has driven amazing result? Project Loom. So Project Loom is an amazing project that we launched 5 years ago where we're bringing in internet access to remote parts of the world. This has an important place in where we're at right now, Puerto Rico. 2017, we know what happened with Hurricane Maria, and guess what Google said? We want to be there, we want to help out, and we want to help out by providing internet to remote locations that have been hit drastically hard by the hurricane. How do we do this? Hey, we have an amazing project here that offers internet Wi-Fi by having a balloon go up into the stratosphere and connect, because people need to connect to their family, needs to connect to their friends, and they launched Project Loom here in Puerto Rico in 2017. Right? So this is a direct result of a 10x thinking. How do we bring internet to the most remote locations of the world? Because from our standpoint, what we need to do is make sure that everyone has access to technology. Everyone has access to information. Another project we launched was Project Wing. As CO2 levels drastically increase and the world is getting hotter and hotter, how do we offer mobility solutions to the world to lower that CO2 levels? And we thought, how do we do that? Well, with drones. Drones run on electricity. Let's create a drone delivery system that will allow us to reach remote places of the world at a fraction of the cost. This is in operations in Africa and certain parts of the Middle East. Very successful program, delivering the type of packages that we need and remote locations during times of emergency. Fantastic, Robert, that's great. I love what you guys are doing. Tell me about AI. This is an AI conference. This is a machine learning conference. What is Google doing in that space? Well, 2014, we bought DeepMind from the UK. Amazing company, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to create an intelligence system that mimics human interaction, human behavior. Really important, again, it has to be positive. If we're gonna buy this company, how are we drastically change the lives of everyone in this room, everyone in the state, everyone in this world? And so DeepMind is heavily focused on doing that. How do we use AI to change the way we interact with the world, and how do we do that to drive 10x improvements in our society? And so one of the clear results is that we started doing a hierarchy. What are the different spaces we could play in that are gonna drive this 10x growth and gonna positively impact our society, our community? So, wow, Rob, great. This matrix looks very familiar for some of us, right? We've all lived and worked in a company that's highly structured. But what's the end result of something like DeepMind? Well, I wanna make sure that when I talk to you, regardless of the language, you understand me in your mother tongue. So one of the things we started working on is Universal Translator, so that anyone can understand what you say when you say it, regardless of the language. What's really cool application on this is that we're heavily focused on video, right? Because we don't just wanna hear you talk, we wanna see you talk. And so one of the applications this particular technology has is that it runs on top of YouTube. So it doesn't matter if you're learning from a person in China, in India, in Puerto Rico, you'll learn what they're saying in your mother tongue, right? And this is all done through machine learning and deep mind thinking. And we could dive into how they actually operate this in later time. It's not suffice to say this is one of about 15 different projects that we're working on right now within Google for DeepMind. Smart cities, right? We've been promised utopia, and where is it at? What's going on? Why haven't we reached this utopian state? Well, we're working on that with big data sets, right? How do we create a smart city where we could live together? And so how do we use the current technologies existing right now that we could pull and create better infrastructure, better CO2 solutions, better residential solutions for our residents? And so what we did is, okay, let's think through the different technologies. We all have heard of IoT. Let's talk about that, sensors, right? We all heard about machine learning. We all heard about design thinking and interaction. How do we bring all these different technologies and integrate them into our current infrastructure base? So in 2016, Google partnered with the city of Toronto and agency, and they launched Sidewalk Labs to create a better understanding of how they could use these technologies. Here's a clear, I'm gonna show you a 3 to 5 seconds clip on what they used to better improve their city infrastructure. And this particular example, it's on CO2 levels.
Toronto is frequently named one of the most sustainable cities in the world, which is awesome because we've set the bar really high for ourselves. That's why at Quayside, it's not enough for our new community to be carbon neutral. Instead, we're actually trying to be climate positive. Here to talk about what all of this...
So what do they mean by that? Climate positive. How do we create infrastructures that take into account how people move within the city, where our zoning laws were created? How do we create actual material that's carbon neutral, right? So they launched this project, and what they did is they used historical data dating back to, I think, 1980s, and ran it atop what the future looks like in 2020, 2030, 2040, and they came up with this plan. The next example is infrastructure and residency, right? We all want to live in beautiful neighborhoods. How do we create the neighborhoods that we want to live in, regardless of the environment?
Housing is the single biggest expense for most people. And that's especially true here in Toronto, which, let's face it, is in a bit of an affordability crisis. But we have this rare opportunity on our waterfront, starting with Quayside, to build a community from scratch, with affordability designed into its DNA.
So that idea is fantastic, right? How do we create a city that we all want to live in that allows everyone to live and be able to afford housing? So what they did with this is they ran regressions as well. What does the next 10, 15 years look like? How do we create an infrastructure base that's not heavy on cost? How do we protect against gentrification to make sure that people that live there historically stay there historically, all through big data? So again, big data is great, But how do we humanize it? How do we bring it down to the common level of our residents, of us as citizens of our city, of our state, of our island, and be able to apply it to live in the world that we want to live in? Now, the next phase here, the next part of our presentation is all around how do you, as an industry leader in your company, use cloud and use ideation to drive results to change your corporate culture, your city culture, and your world. So the very first step that I want you guys to do, and please humor me, is actually write down your name on your phone, on your laptop, and your role, and tell us what you think machine learning can do for you, right? There's no wrong answers here. I don't want you to think small, I want you to think big. What can I do to change my current company? First piece. What can I do to change my current industry? Second piece. And what can I do to change my world? And when I talk about this, you want to think as big as possible. And what we highly recommend is that you do this in a group setting and you bring in different individuals from different sectors of your teams to run through this exercise. The reason why is because we don't want what's called groupthink. We don't want a bunch of engineers sitting around each other or a bunch of financiers sitting around together and thinking the same thing. We want new and brilliant ideas that come in and help us think outside of the box and push our boundaries. That's what the aim here is to push those boundaries and then use those learnings and use machine learning and AI and big data sets to combine and see if they actually meet the criteria of 10x thinking to drive the results you want within your industry. So it's not about me, it's not about Google, right? We're not here because Google. We're here because you want to change the way your industry works, you want to change the way your company works, you want to change the way your island works. So you need to start thinking about feasibility studies and how I could actually bring about those changes. And it's not magic, it's systemic. It's a system that you create to reinforce the learnings that you've gotten. And I'll talk about certain examples that Google has started that have failed, but has led to other learnings. For example, we, 15 years ago, wanted to improve the way people learn, right? And one of the things we wanted to do, very ambitious, we wanted to be able to make sure that everyone can understand us regardless of the language, right? So we launched Google Translate. That directly led to Google AdWords in Spanish that drives revenue for our company. So how does that work for you? How can we help you achieve your goals? So first thing is innovation and ideation. You want to make sure you're thinking large. You want to make sure you're thinking through machine learning, how can this idea get us 10x improvements? And focus on user case studies, right? There's a lot of ideas out there. Let's focus on the top 3 user case studies that we could really implement in the next 3 to 5 months. I would say a quarter to 2 quarters to get started and bring in very powerful partners. We have amazing partners here in the room today that can help implement these changes using machine learning. And then you can bring that back to your prospective team and say, hey, this is what we learned from this particular project. Can we implement this nationwide? Can we implement this industry-wide? And can we be a market leader? What we don't want you to get hung up on is the technical training of machine learning. You have experts in the room that can help you with that. You don't want to think about which algorithm, right? We want to outsource that to individuals and companies and consultants that have a better understanding of how to do that. Very important point as you're going through this exercise is, all of them are really important, but I really want to focus on number 5. Respect the 3 principles. Focus, focus, focus on the end user. You should have an in-depth passion for your customer. You want to think, sleep, walk, talk in your customer's lingo. You want to make sure that when you think about them, you think about what makes them happy, what makes them miserable, and how you as a prospective company are going to alleviate that, right? And then divergence and convergence, which I'll touch on, and those 2 differences to bring together a 10x experience for your industry. And lastly, allow yourself to be weird. Let's get weird, right? Allow yourself to think outside the box, because sometimes we're so stuck in our industry that we are not allowing ourselves. And one of the exercises we do is we think like a 5-year-old. We're like, all right, everyone, put on your 5-year-old hats. See the world as a 5-year-old, right? What are you seeing? How are you experiencing the world around you? Is it the same way you experience as a 10-year-old, 15-year-old? And you go through this exercise to get yourself away from your day-to-day thinking and start thinking in different ways and innovative ways to use to drive the innovation you need within your company. So let's talk about an actual example. And the actual example is Google. One simple idea. How do we organize the world's information? That was it. That was their 10x thought when they first started the company. How do we, as a company that started in the garage in Mountain View, organize the world information? And through that one thought, we have maybe the first $1 trillion company, right? So it's not complex. We had an earlier conversation, una charla, talking about, the ideas aren't difficult. The concepts aren't difficult. It's the implementation that's really difficult. So I push you guys as industry leaders to think through that. What's the one thing I want my industry to know our company as? And how do we create 10x thinking to drive the innovation to become the next trillion-dollar company? So let's talk about an actual user case study. And we used that example of the 5-year-old, right? Oral-B was like, hey, we need to launch a whole line for toothbrushes for kids, right? Guess who was in the room? You think any 5-year-olds were in the room? Probably not, right? A bunch of old white men is what we say. A bunch of old white men were in the room. And you think they came up with this concept? They didn't. But through ideation and design thinking, they said, okay, well, what will a 5-year-old experience if they're holding a toothbrush? They don't have great motor skills, right? They can't really hold it properly. So let's create something that's geared towards the end user, which is the 5-year-old. The other example that I absolutely love is the Hello Ladies. Or you guys remember that? You guys remember that Old Spice commercial? Right? Why was that so powerful? Who's the primary buyer when they go grocery shopping? Is it men or women? Women, right? Who was Old Spice targeting? Men. But through insight and through data and through sampling, they realized, hey, why are we marketing to men when women are the primary decision makers when it comes to shopping? And so they launched the Hello Ladies campaign. So that's exactly what we want you to think through. Using data to drive the insights that you need to create the type of market that you want to capture. So divergence versus convergence. And what does this mean for us, right? Divergence is let's think outside the box. Let's push ourselves outside the box. Let's go outside the industry norm to get ahead of them. And once we realize the type of data that's coming in through that divergence and the type of projects that we're launching, agile prototyping, we can incorporate that and get back into the lane of the industry to get ahead of them. So what does this mean for us and how do we drive innovation? First of all, focus on your stakeholders. I keep talking about an empathy, know your customer, breed your customer, think your customer. We all have done, empathy mapping. If we haven't, we should definitely do that. It's a great exercise. But it all starts with your end user. What are they going through and what are the pain points that they're experiencing? And how do we incorporate machine learning and data, big data sets, to drive the type of innovation that we need? Larry Page, when he buys a company, this is one of our founders, he calls it the toothbrush test for a company, right? What is the toothbrush test? How many times do we brush our teeth a given day? Twice? Some of us 3 times for the rest of our lives, right? So what company or what kind of solution do we want to offer the marketplace that's like a toothbrush? Twice a day, 3 times a day for the rest of our lives. And that's how we start thinking 10x, right? That's how we start expanding our mind. And what comes down to is we want to rapidly prototype as fast as possible. We don't want to hold back and wait. We want to move fast, fail early, we talked about this earlier, and adopt and adapt the technology and the information we gathered from those tests, right, to drive 10x actions. And it comes down to 2 things for Google, right? It comes down to user. How do we change the life for the user in a positive way? And the second piece, talent. It's all about the talent. Who's sitting next to you? Who's running? Are they running as fast as you are? We were talking earlier in our table, one company used to give new employees a pair of sneakers. What is that sending? What kind of message is that sending to new employees? You better start running, You better move. We don't want you to sit around and have 20 meetings, and that doesn't drive any innovation, any drive, any bottom line results that your boss would want. So this is exactly the 2 different systems that we want to inculcate with you. The top one is definitely not the system we want. We want the bottom one, right? We're risk averse. We take forever. We have a planning committee. We sit around in a group of 20 people. Everyone has their opinion. Nothing gets done. And if you calculate the hourly rate of each individual, how much money did we just burn through just by deciding that? Versus fail fast and iterate, right? So I'll give you and Google's not good at this, by the way. Google has to learn how to do this constantly. So one of the key examples that we have is Google Lens. You guys remember those Google Lens, right? Completely failed, right? But now we have Oculus. One of the leading engineers on that team, he sat in the room when the concept was rolling out. And they were discussing what color should the lens be of Google Lens. Right? Should it be red? Should it be green? And he's sitting there, he's counting, like, he makes 300,000, he makes 500,000, he's a billionaire. Like, how much money are we running through? And it's all about opinion. not about data, not about actual use case. So he was like heartbroken because he came from Yahoo, and he said that he thought Google was better than this. He went running to his lab, rapidly prototyped a lens. Guess how long it took him? 5 hours. It took him 5 hours to rapidly prototype a lens, brought everyone back into the room, and everyone used those lenses and realized, yes, we should not go with red, we should go with white, obviously now. And now, for those of us who have Google Pixel, you could use the same technology to see what kind of shirts you're wearing. I don't know if you guys have Google Pixels, but there's a functionality now. So let's say the young lady was talking about retail. She saw a shirt she likes. Now within Google Lens, you could actually take a picture of a person, and it'll tell you where that shirt is being sold at, and similar shirts or blouses or shoes. Really cool technology that allowed us to rapidly prototype. Even though it wasn't the market fit for that particular industry, it allowed us to launch different product services in different industries because we were early to adopt and early to test fast, fail early, and use those learnings to release new product lines. So what is ML? I'm not going to dive too much time on this because we've kind of gone through it ad hominem. Enough to know is using data sets to drive innovation. And the model is fairly straightforward. The more data you have, the more it improves. What's important for me is how does this drive results for you as a prospective industry and a prospective leader in your industry. So we'll talk about that in this particular slide. Feifei has a beautiful little 3-year-old, and she was wondering, hey, how do we use data to improve pictures? And she started thinking, what is my daughter experiencing when she's taking these pictures? And how would she define it as she's taking these pictures, right? And she started using machine learning to say, okay, well, if we have enough data sets, can they pick up what a beach looks like? Can they pick up what a palm tree looks like? Can they pick up what a dog looks like? And if we keep churning in these data sets into the machine learning algorithm, slowly but surely, they started getting it right. So now a cool functionality of Google Photos is that you could take a picture of whatever you want. You could have 1,000 pictures. All you have to type in is beach, dog, house, and it'll pull up all the pictures that are defined by what you want to find within that data set of images. Really cool functionality there. Another case study is reading and writing. How many of us have Gmail? Most of us, right? How many of us have seen that service array? We start typing and it self-populates for us. You know what's really cool about that functionality? It doesn't do it in any other way than your way of texting. When you start using variations of your text, various variations of your messages, it would adapt and adopt the way you communicate, not the way an AI machine does. So it's very specific to your input, if you will. We talked about this, being able to speak and using the power of AI to pick up real-time audio speech patterns, to be able to communicate in your language, very powerful. We want to make sure that everyone can communicate with each other. Can you imagine a world where it doesn't matter if you're Chinese, Indian, French, you could communicate in the same language? Self-driving cars, I can't wait for this to happen. I'm from Los Angeles, so it's one of those tools. And it all works with sensory perception, as you guys know. And the rise of AI, obviously, the data sets that we're creating, it doubles year over year over year. I think it's Murphy's Law, if I'm not mistaken. AlphaGo, deep learning. Have you guys heard of this result of deep learning? Deep learning tool has beat the champion when it comes to a game called Go, which there's over, I think it's I want to say 1 billion iterations of moves that you can do. And the grand champion lost to our deep learning machine. So what is Google's goal when it comes to their vision for you as an entrepreneur, as a business leader? Well, we talked about that in the very beginning. For Google, it's very straightforward. They kind of encapsulate their mission statement of organizing the world's information. When it comes to machine learning and AI, it's democratize AI. So all of us in this room can leverage this technology to drive growth and innovation within our company. And so we've worked with over 10,000 companies, varying from startups to big box, billion-dollar companies. We're always launching production and new tools and services to help those companies that adopted our platform to grow. And we're constantly improving the cloud and the partners within the cloud. And through this, Google has been able to double their earnings, which is fantastic, incorporating. The question is, will you adopt this technology and will you be next? Thank you so much.
Preguntas.
Ahora sí puedo hablar en español.
Ahora sí habla en español. Ya vuelve ya deja el show en español. ¿Preguntas? Nadie le pregunta nada a Google.
Está bien, mejor. Muchas gracias.